Language learning is like onions.
They stink?
Yes. No.
Somebody once told me of a person who learned English to fluency built on a foundation of watching the movie Shrek over and over again, which is a ridiculous idea. So naturally, I decided to run the Oscar-winning dialogue and music of the movie Shrek through some code that I developed to model how we learn languages. I wanted to see what the benefits of this approach could be, as well as what the limitations could teach us about the importance of choosing the right content, the importance of repetition, and the mechanisms of language learning. Here's that story, what I uncovered from the data, and tangible lessons to improve how you learn languages. As kids, we often have more time but less freedom than we know what to do with, which can create interesting scenarios where we watch the same movie or read the same book over and over again. For me, those were the fantasy series Harry Potter and Aragon, but for one non-English speaking Redditor somewhere in the Middle East, that was a bootleg copy of the movie Shrek. So our first question is, assuming that you have the tolerance, is the English used in the movie Shrek enough for you to lay a foundation in the language? Spoiler alert. Shrek is not the linguistic brain rot you may think it is. First, a bit of data. Shrek has 803 lines spread across 40 characters, though 4 of them do the majority of the talking. That amounts to 8,346 total words of dialogue, though when you remove repetition, that leaves us with just under 1,300 unique words. And now back to our non-conventional English learner, this little kid in the Middle East decides to watch the movie in Arabic a few times to get the gist of the story. When he knew the story, he switched over to watching it in English, again and again and again, over a period of about 2 months. At first, naturally, the English just rushed by, but Eddie Murphy and Mike Myers' characters kept him engaged enough to want to keep watching. But then his vocabulary starts to increase as he picks up more and more words, and when it comes to grammar, he's able to bring some of those questions that he has to an English tutor who he starts working with in the months before he moves to an English-speaking country. After those 2 months of regular Shrek consumption, our young pupil felt confident enough to move on to other movies and TV shows in English. Let's assume that all in all, that's about 50 viewings of our esteemed cinematic work, and now we can move on to data and modeling. As we've covered in other videos, a conservative estimate based on academic research is that you need to see and understand a word in context around 20 times before you can consider it acquired in your vocabulary. That means that as you watch the movie, by the 20th time you've heard the word
Donkey. Donkey. Donkey.
Donkey.
Donkey. Donkey. Donkey. Donkey. Donkey.
you can consider that you've learned it. This, of course, is a very simplistic assumption, and we'll play around a bit with that more later, but let's start with that 20 number for now. Let's model how you'd learn those thousands of words as you watch Shrek over and over again. Well, once you begin watching, the vocab words start coming,
and they don't stop coming, and they don't stop coming, and they don't stop coming, and they don't stop.
Unsurprisingly, on just day 20 of this challenge, you would have familiarized yourself with the almost 1,300 unique English words that are there, because any word that came up at least one time in the movie, you've seen at least 20 times in your repeated viewings. You're not going to fully internalize the depth and context behind each word, but this is what beginning to lay a foundation looks like. As an adult, you might get bored watching the same thing over and over again, but at least one YouTuber has done a similar challenge where he watched the Spider-Man movie 50 times and had pretty good results. But the great thing about this 20 exposures rule is that you can hear a word for the first time in Shrek and then have it reinforced for you as you listen to podcasts and watch the news and sitcoms. Now back to that Shrek data. We see two interesting jumps. The first is on day 10, where we acquire all the words mentioned twice, since 2 mentions per viewing times 10 days gives us that 20 exposure threshold for all of these words. And then we have that same process on day 20 for all the words mentioned just once in the movie. But now the question becomes, what is the quality of the dialogue in Shrek? Is that 1,300 valuable words or no? In the common European framework of reference for languages, with a vocab size of around 1,000 words, that would put you at the A2 level, which is pre-intermediate. If we use the SMOG readability index, which gives us the reading level of a specific text based on its complexity, the movie Shrek puts us at a 7th grade reading level. Judge for yourself, but in my opinion,
That'll do, donkey. That'll do.
Don't get me wrong, there is an inherent absurdity to the fact that you could watch the movie Shrek 20 times, learn every single word in the movie based on just those viewings, and then you'd be at a pre-intermediate level in another language. But the absurd part of this is the timeline, not the quality of the content. And it's a technique that I applied successfully in German using this book. A lot of people like to use music to deepen their understanding of a new language and culture. And what better accompaniment to your ogre-inspired language learning endeavors than the illustrious works of Smash Mouth, Baha Men, and the Grammy-nominated Rufus Wainwright. Rufus Wainwright. Barring any long-term psychological damage you may be doing with such a content diet, adding in music when you're studying a new language can be a very effective tool, especially if you look at the lyrics ahead of time to maximize what you learn. Yeah, words in a song might not be as sticky or understandable when you think about the number of times you need to listen to them, so that could be 30 or 40 exposures before they really stick for you. But if you listen to the Shrek soundtrack alongside your daily viewing, you'd be learning more words and you'd be learning some words faster. Including the soundtrack in a challenge like this means that you would learn almost 1,600 total words, 300 more than if you had just watched the movie alone. And you may be surprised that just consuming content can help you progress so quickly in a language, but there are tools that help you align your immersion to more effective methods. And one such platform is FluentU, the sponsor of today's video. FluentU is a suite of tools built for beginner and advanced language learners to help make content more accessible, and they have integration with Netflix and YouTube. It starts with curated, authentic video libraries for beginner and intermediate learners with genuinely entertaining content. The platform is loaded with useful features like pre-made vocab lists for a specific piece of content, or content-specific quizzes with audio, and there's a vocab builder whether you want to make cards or mark what's already in your vocabulary. In particular, I love that I can look up any word or grammar term and FluentU will take me to the spot in a video where I can see that word in action and get tips on how it's used. That lookup process not only helps with content, but you can also get definitions and grammar explanations within the platform. And as you watch more with these tools, you make the transition from just learning words to building sentences. The platform is available in a browser as well as iOS and Android, plus they've even got a Google Chrome extension to use with any video on Netflix or YouTube that has subtitles. And the interactive subtitles have the added benefit that they've got example pictures for a lot of words when you hover, and when you click in, you immediately have other example sentences and links to other examples of the word being used. Plus, you can add words to your vocab list directly from YouTube or Netflix. In my time as a language learner, I've tried out dozens of tools to learn more vocab, find better content, and just deepen my understanding of Hebrew and German. FluentU has more than a few features that kept having me ask, why don't other platforms do this? Check out the links in the description if you're interested in a 14-day trial and a special discount, and thank you to FluentU for partnering on this video. So, is it really a good idea to try to learn a language only by watching a movie like Shrek?
Of course!
Really?
No.
There are clearly limitations to this approach, but the point is that those limitations can teach us how you can and should learn a language. The first limitation is the rather narrow sliver of the English language that you'd be learning from a movie like Shrek.
No, not the buttons! Not my gumdrop button!
This is a kids' movie about fairy tale creatures. Naturally, there are going to be discussions of daily life and the human experience that aren't fully explored. Another limitation of this approach is that very, very few people would find it motivating to watch the same piece of content, let alone a full movie, 20 times. Another struggle would be the accents of the different characters in this movie. Unless you have a very specific group of Scottish and African American vernacular speaking friends, the accents and dialects are gonna give you some trouble.
Can't we just settle this over a pint?
That being said, it's not uncommon for more thematic and kids movies like this. But each of these limitations does also reveal something about how you should learn a language. Knowing these limitations can help us design something better, because when you're trying to learn a language, you need to maximize the time you spend with the language, maximize your ability to notice what you do and do not understand, and make sure that you're maintaining a positive attitude towards the language. One of the best ways that you can maximize your time with a language is by picking content that you enjoy, rather than just finding study materials that you think will be helpful. Variety is the key word here because it gets you exposed to the different facets of a language and keeps you engaged across your interests. Nobody's looking at your language learning browser history, so you can watch the movie Shrek 20 times, or watch as much anime as you want, or reread Harry Potter in yet another language. That being said, you might think that you can watch or read your way to fluency just by immersing in another language, and you can, but that is quite a long road, and it's longer than if you were to also sprinkle in some grammar and textbook study along the way, and you can do that in little spurts just to speed up the process. I mentioned before that there's linguistic research showing that you need to see and understand a word in context around 20 times before you can call it part of your vocabulary. That number is probably lower if we're talking about a class setting where you can get an answer tailored to every specific question you have, and that number of 20 is probably much higher if you're just immersing and not pausing every time you come across a new word. Things may seem more complicated when we're talking about grammar, but again, assuming that you're paying attention and trying to see what you do and do not understand, it's just a matter of learning and then getting confused the next time you see it, and then reestablishing your understanding of that concept to make it stick. Then you have to scale that up for more and more understanding. The need for repetition in language learning is clearly at odds with our goal of having some variety, so you need to balance between the two. From my experience, you want to engage with the material long enough so that you understand at least 80 to 90% of what's going on, because remember, there's probably a lot more that you don't even realize that you don't understand. As a beginner in another language, you'll want to repeat things enough times so that you can really get what's going on, but as you advance, you'll see that you'll come to a point where you can hear something in a language and process it instantly. When I came across the story that inspired this video and then started doing the modeling and then the research, I kept thinking to myself, what a dull way to learn a language. You definitely want to watch something that you actually enjoy. So I'd also encourage you to check out these videos about how you can watch content that you might actually enjoy, like the show Friends or SpongeBob or any of the channels from the Easy Languages team. Let me know with a comment if you used repetition like this with a book, a movie, or TV show to really establish yourself in a language. That's all for this video. Subscribe if you haven't done so yet, and I'll catch you in the next one.